We have risen from the ashes to school the masses. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Scholars of Wrestling Show, episode 431. I'm your man behind the microphone, Scholar Jeff, and joining us this week is once again the reigning Scholars of Wrestling World Heavyweight Champion. You know him, you love him. He is Scholar Brian. Scholar Brian, how's life treating you today, champ?
Retained said title by the skin of my teeth and also by an unfortunate failing of our beefcase holder.
I have no idea what you're referring to.
Sure you don't. But and
Laying
then
the
and then
sarcasm on pretty thick.
and then took the week off to celebrate. And now we're in the mindset of we're on the road to SummerSlam, we're on the road to All In, we're on the road to Blood and Guts,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's in a week that didn't have much newsworthy to talk about. There was certainly one thing.
Oh yes, there was. And we're gonna get right into it right now. We're no pretense because this past weekend on AEW Dynamite, there certainly was a quite a surprise that a lot of people were anticipating, but I personally had some doubt that we would actually see. I am talking about the course of the announcements of the fifth men for the Blood and Guts match next week. For the Blackpool Combat Club, we got Pac coming back, no pun intended. And for the Elite, who did the Elite end up producing?
They ended up producing, when you think about it, okay, there was no other option here. If you really think about it, if you think hard, just based off of storyline and the way they've been building this up, there was no other option. Anything else would have been a severe disappointment. And everybody knows by now, I'm talking about Kota Ibushi, the Golden Elite, the tag team partner of Kenny Omega in Japan. And based off of the storyline they're building now about the elite coming back together, about friendship, about bonding, about love and everything, there was no, as much as people had doubts, as much as people may be surprised, there was no other option here. It's like in your head when you were thinking about other participants that could have been announced for the elite. Who did you really think could cover that fifth spot if it wasn't Ibushi?
I'll tell you what, given the rumors that have come out, last week, that supposedly CM Punk was pushing to get a spot in the Blood and Guts match, presumably on the side of the Blackpool Combat Club. Frankly, most of my attention really wasn't focused on the elite side of things. It was all focused on Blackpool Combat Club. Because there was a part of me that kept really hoping, okay, is this how we eventually build towards the matches between CM Punk and the elite? But
No, it's one of those things that with the CM Punk stuff. Okay, he's obviously being set up for. I mean, they're giving me my doubts with the way they're building up Adam Cole and MJF right now, but they might be doing that. I think they're building up for an MJF CM Punk title versus title match. Again, the way that he came in. Okay, I think we'll get CM Punk versus Elite at some point, but For me, I think it's too soon. He just came back. There's other feuds he can do, and the uh and the MJF one, that I think they need to do that first. The way he came in with the title, with the "What's in the bag, Max," and all that, and talking about how he never lost the title, which is true technically. Okay, so it's like so there's build there that they can use, and I
So are
think they can do
you
that first.
so are
So
you thinking this is going to be the Wembley match?
I'm thinking yes, because I don't think you, or at least that's what I would think. I'm not. I'm not sure based off of the build of the last couple weeks, though,
Hmm.
because they could be building for MJF Adam Cole at
Yeah,
the
that's
at the All In pay-per-view. So that's muddled and all that. What I do believe is that we're not getting CM Punk versus an elite member in Wembley. I believe that we can cross that off the list right now. I think we'll get there at some point, but I think that upper management still thinks it's too soon
hmm.
because, from my understanding, they still haven't sat down and talked out their issues, and they need to do that first if they're gonna put on any kind of performance against each other, or else we're just going to be back at square one where we were before. So you need to get that sit down taken care of, and I don't think they're going to do that before Wembley. But
All right.
what they actually did, though, oh, we all know Pac is an elite hater since the beginning of AEW. Everything he's done has been to undermine the elite members. Okay, the it started with him and Paige at the beginning of at the beginning of AEW. It turned into the Death Triangle versus the Elite that had been going on since basically the beginning of AEW, before Death Triangle was even named. So Pac was when he came out and returned, it's like, oh, I didn't even think of that.
I didn't think about that either.
I didn't think about that, but based in storyline terms, because they broke his face earlier this year, it actually ties in very well to why he'd want to be a part of this match. So I'm like, okay, cool. And when it, as I said earlier, with the way they've been building everything up, with the elite coming back together, with them all talking about friendship, love, and strengthening bonds and coming together to overcome a frankly superior foe when it's just when it's the when it's or the way it's been portrayed since the beginning, since Moxley versus Page. Okay, the Blackpool Combat Club has been portrayed as the one group that can take these guys down.
Hmm.
So it's like you need to bring in someone of that caliber who you can see taking the elite over the top and being able to nail a coffin in this feud. Okay, and for me, there was no other option on the elite side. Nothing else works at all. It had to be Ibushi or you can't do it.
I won't disagree with you there. For me personally, it was more a matter of would Ibushi actually agree to do something like this? Which I'm sure some people hearing that are going to be like, well, of course he would. His past friendship with Kenny Omega, yada yada, their connection there. But I'm thinking more specifically of the sort of dodgy nature we've seen of Kota Ibushi lately, where he tends to not stay in one place for very often these days.
Well, it's also that I don't think that he's signing with AEW. I do think this is a one-off at this point. I think with everything that went on with New Japan and the fact that they're good now, I do see him signing back with New Japan. But this opens doors for using him at future events like Forbidden Doors and all that. So that so it's like I never saw Ibushi as an AEW superstar. I still don't. But the way that AEW has been being run, the Japan stars don't need to be full-time competitors in order to be in a match of this standing. Which
Very
is
true.
why which is why I was like, has to be Ibushi. Has to be. There's no one in AEW right now who can fill this spot. You need to go and you need to get your best friend because that's what this storyline has been this entire time.
And I'll tell you what, I wasn't totally convinced they were gonna pull it off, but I'm glad they did. Interestingly enough, another match we got set up just recently for later on this week, as a matter of fact. This Saturday, we have for the Owen Hart Championship, the Owen Hart Cup Invitational, rather. We've got for the men, we've got a finals set up for between CM Punk and Ricky Starks. I'm not surprised personally that Punk is in the finals of this thing. What I do find myself wondering is which is the way to go, which is the wisest decision. Obvious selection would indicate that usually Punk would win, but part of me thinks that maybe he'll actually let Ricky Starks go over. And then this is one of those things that really elevates him beyond his current level. What do you think?
This to me isn't a matter of who wins. For me, this entire tournament has been about it's the linchpin to turn CM Punk heel.
Hmm.
Because I think this is because as you've probably noticed, everywhere that isn't Chicago, he's been being booed.
So are you
So,
suggesting
so
that
it's
he's
like
going to pull a fast
it.
one, cheat to beat
Well,
Ricky Starks and go
it
over?
it's the question of how he chooses to do it. Does Ricky Starks beat him and then he turns on him after the match and attacks him and beats him down? Or does CM Punk do what you just said? That's 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 where it comes into play because it's like he's turning heel. They've been building and building and building. The way he's been talking, it's like MJF in New York. It's like MJF gets booed everywhere else, but in New York, he's like
Not in
the
Long Island,
conquering
he's
hero.
not.
In MJF,
Yeah. The MJF is not getting booed in Long Island.
that's what I'm saying. And CM Punk has been getting booed everywhere except Chicago.
Yeah, and with
So
everything
it's
else,
like,
it's
do you
it's a
pull the
tough,
trigger?
yeah.
It's like I think they're pulling the trigger at the end of the match, no matter what happens. So I'm intrigued about that.
Fair enough. But if it
But
came
it's
down
like,
to
but
the
it's like
actual
for
winner of the
me,
match, who do you
but
got?
but but for me, it's like I'm okay with either one. I would like to see Ricky Starks go over. I'd like to see the way that CM Punk was talking in his comeback. It was like I want to put over the next generation. I want to help out the young guys and all that. Well, here's your opportunity, champ. You know? Here, Chris Jericho tried. Okay, but that ran too long, and it didn't get Ricky Starks to where he needed to be. Here's your chance to heal the wounds that you caused to your fan base with what you did with Hangman Page, where it took 6 months to build him back up to the point where we could run what we're running with that group with the Elite right now. Because they try to run this story immediately after the CM Punk feud with Hangman Page. It doesn't work because nobody cares about Hangman Page at that point. So it's like now's the chance to do what you said you wanted to do. For me, the right move is to put Ricky Starks over here and have him win. But I would be okay if they had CM Punk turn heel and cheat to win.
Okay. Well, we'll see certainly how it all goes on this upcoming Saturday. But in the meantime, we also had, speaking of heels, we have a debut against one of AEW's top heels. Swerve Strickland did defeat a debuting Nick Wayne, but Nick Wayne did look pretty impressive in his debut match. I was He looked like he was a 18-year-old kid just really just looking to impress everyone and just make a splash right away. The kid's definitely got some talent. Maybe needs a little bit of polishing and experience beyond all the flippy doos, but he's
Yeah.
looking promising to me. What do you think?
Yeah, it's like he needs polishing and experience, of course. Duh, he's 18. so, so it's like from what I saw, there's a ton of potential there, and I look forward to see him cultivating it and to see him grow in AEW. The way that I saw this and the way that they built him up. Now, I'm not trying to compare these two individuals because they're two completely different people, and the way that these companies are run are completely different. So take what I'm saying for what it is. What this reminded me of was when John Cena first came in as that as as that milk toast face
Ruthless
character,
aggression guy.
ruthless aggression, and he came out to challenge Kurt Angle. This kind of had parallels to me because it's like John Cena didn't win that match. Everyone's complaining on the interwebs. Like you built this kid up through promos and all that, and then you had him lose. And I'm like, well, what's the problem with that? He's 18.
I
It,
agree.
it's like there's he's
Frankly,
18. He's 18. The experience isn't there yet. Swerve got one over on him as as established heel characters do. It's the same thing that happened when John Cena came out and faced Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle got one over on John Cena because John Cena was the plucky newbie, and Kurt Angle used his heel wily smarts to get one over on the new kid. It's the same thing. You don't just because you build someone up the way that you do, having him lose his first match isn't burying him right off the bat. Okay, the fight he put up, holy crap, dude.
yeah, this is not a burial by any means. It's a loss, but definitely not a burial at all.
Yeah, I expect big things from the kid because of the way they built him up, and because because of the way they featured him throughout the show in the last couple of weeks. I expect big things from the kid because they obviously expect big things from him, and I'm looking forward to seeing him grow based off of what I saw in that match because that match was great.
Just wait. In a bunch of years, we're gonna eventually get Nick Wayne versus -1.
I want to see Nick Wayne versus Hook. Give me it.
That's gonna happen first. And you know what? That would be a hell of a match too. I dig it.
uh,
But speaking of matches, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording tonight's episode. But one idea I had that I really wanted to bring to the table here at the Scholars Wrestling Show, as we talked about in the past, we wanted to talk about some of the more noteworthy moments and really doing different episodes of analysis for various subjects. And one idea or topic I heard come up recently on another certain distinguished wrestling show was a topic of some of the best matches that we as fans have seen live in person. Now, I'd certainly like to do a part two to this list when more of the Scholars crew is here with us. But yeah, for now, let's focus on the two of us. We were talking about a little bit about some of the most noteworthy matches that you've seen live, but for you, there wasn't so much quantity as much as quantity.
yeah, I never really had the ability to go to live shows or pay-per-views up until the time that we met, started hanging out and doing and doing this podcast because it just wasn't something my family was interested in at the time. And I didn't really have the money or the funds to do it myself. So, but the one pay-per-view show that I've been to was at the Prudential Center in New Jersey. It was Extreme Rules 2014, which featured Bray Wyatt versus John Cena in the cage in a cage. It featured the first meeting between the Shield and Evolution, and it featured Daniel Bryan in his first title defense. I'm not sure if it was his only title defense because I'm not entirely certain when he got injured because it was soon after that I believe he had to relinquish the title when he lost it after the Yes Movement. I'm not certain if I'm correct on that, but I do
That
know that
that
he
does
got
sound pretty certain. I can't remember when exactly that was, but it does the timeline does add up.
yeah. So I'm like, it's more of an entire night encapsulation. My my match list because the first match that I ever saw live. Okay, this sounds like a joke, but it's not. Okay, the first WWE wrestling match that I ever saw live was the WLC match. That's it.
But you know what? That may sound like a joke at first glance, but given how good that match actually ended up
Yeah.
being, that's a part of wrestling history right there.
Yeah, it's like that match had no business being as good as it actually was. And but it's like those guys knew exactly what they were out there to do, and they did it to the best of their abilities. Like I'm like if this is how the show is started, okay, I'm gonna have I'm at least gonna have fun throughout because I'm watching midgets in a TLC match right now.
I'm sorry, I gotta ask. As someone who was actually there, it just seemed like such a, from the outside looking in, it seemed like such a happening in pro wrestling. I I only saw it watching over pay-per-view, of course, but can you tell me a little bit about what was the audience like? Like, what was the experience of watching that match live? Because I get the sense that there was a lot of, okay, this is going to be a joke, but then people eventually realized, no, this isn't a joke at all. This is legit and it's good. What was that
Yeah,
experience like?
it was one of those when they were doing the entrances. Uh, okay, you didn't get a lot of reaction because of who the participants were. It's like nobody really cared about 3MB. Nobody really, and it was like, okay, this is going to be a fun little diversion because we've got two little people in a ladder match. Okay, they brought back the little tiny ladders that Booker T had in that uh in that Money in the Bank match. so that was so that was fun. And but it was one of the but then they started going and it's like, wow, this is actually a lot better than what we thought this is going to be. And by the end of it, it's like other than the big three, other I wouldn't even I'd put the reaction over Daniel Bryan versus Kane because I think at that point because of the way that they ran the title feud after Daniel Bryan won the title at WrestleMania, I think that the yes movement was starting to die down anyway. Like they were still doing it, but it wasn't like WrestleMania season high pitched. Like everything was yes movement at that time in the run. Like Prudential Center, the crowd got into it with the yes chants, but it wasn't fever pitch. So it's like I would honestly put the reaction to the WLC match over the main event title match. Only
And
eclipsed by Bray Wyatt and the creepy kid and and the Shield versus Evolution, which really should have been the main event of that show.
yeah, there's definitely a bunch of those that I've been to my fair share of shows, and there's absolutely plenty of circumstances like that. And I do have a little list on my end. Well, I'll give some examples of that. But as far as as other matches, I was just going to give my top five in no particular order. But I did have a couple of honorable mentions that are worth talking about. The first honorable mention number one is Survivor Series 2006, which is notable to me for one reason. I am a big fan of Sabu, and this to date is the one and only time I've ever been able to see him live. He was in one of the Survivor Series matches. He only did
Because
like two spots. He was in the ring for like maybe 15 seconds and he got eliminated, but damn it, I got to see Sabu wrestle live. And no one can take that
because
away from me.
that was back when ECW was a brand, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and it it hadn't quite became what it was destined to become yet. It was still trying to be Paul Heyman's ECW.
Yeah. And it was one of those things where there were only a couple of handful of standouts that really came over to, I guess, what you would call the main roster. Rob Van Dam, Sabu, a bunch of those types of guys. But I remember just like that was the match I wanted to see more so than anything else. Yeah, I technically got to see him. but but the match itself was just okay. But just looking at them again on the main event for that show was Batista versus King Booker, which really wasn't. Yeah, in hindsight, it was. You would think this was a really good match, but it's not both men at their best. But looking back, like, here's another mixed bag on that same show. The first match on the main card was another Survivor Series match, 4-on-4. We've got Team WWE legends Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, Ron Simmons, and Sergeant Slaughter beating the Spirit Squad. Like, on the one hand, I'm glad to have seen Dusty Rhodes actually wrestle a match, but at the same time, it's against the Spirit Squad. Let's be
Yeah,
real.
and it was 2006, long after any of these dudes except Ric Flair sh
Yeah. I
should have been
remember
in the
Ric
ring.
Flair and Ron Simmons doing most of the heavy lifting in that match
Yeah,
very
I'm
vividly.
I'm sure Dusty Rhodes did some bionic elbows.
Oh, of course he
And,
did.
yeah, you have to. And but it's like because that was the Spirit Squad, and they were basically just selling monkeys at that point, because it's like they were just out there to sell a lot and to go down quickly.
Yeah, it was more of a happening than an actual match.
And that was Nick Nemeth, pay your dues.
Dolph Ziggler, yet he was not. No.
Yes.
But as far as my actual list of actual top 5 matches in no particular order that I've seen live, this one is another one I mentioned to you before we went on the air. One of the best matches I remember seeing live, and probably one of the first pay-per-views I ever from WWE that I actually remember seeing live. It was Survivor Series 2002, which was the first appearance of the Elimination Chamber. So
Yes.
I got to see the final, like you said, the final title win of Shawn Michaels and his poopy brown tights
Yes. The legend of Senior Poopy Pants. and and
and
the
other
night
related tales.
and and the night that, like, we already knew that Triple H was badass, right? Because he tore his quad. Was it his quad? When
Yeah, he tore his quad before. I don't.
he
It
he
wasn't this
tore his
night.
quad and he tore his quad and finished the match. So we already knew that he was a badass. Okay, but then Rob Van Dam just completely crushes his throat because he screwed up a 5-star frog splash from the top of the pod and landed leg first on his throat. Ouch. And then Triple H is like, can barely breathe, but he goes on for another 20 to 25 minutes. So it's just another cap. It's just another tip of the cap to the legend that is Triple H and his toughness in order to finish matches in the ring. That he does, whether he tears something or he gets his shit crushed or anything like that. And you had it, the dawning of a new era. It was the first uh, elimination chamber match that was ever had, and some people still contend that it's the best one.
I'll tell you what. It certainly was up there. It certainly has set the standard pretty darn high. But in terms of that was just one match of my top 5. If I there again, I've seen plenty of great matches live, including I will say right now another. I'm gonna put it as another honorable mention. It was from an indie show. It was from Warriors of Wrestling, a promotion there, and it was where a good friend of the show got his start. He's in his first actual professional wrestling match. I remember seeing that live. He's now on the East Coast. He's a referee, DM Stevens. Book him. Great man, great wrestler, great referee. Whatever you want to do, he'll do. But I can say that I was there for his first professional match, and that was just a real with a bunch of our friends, and that was a really great time. Not the most high profile one match on there, but a very special one all the same.
Yeah, it's like it's it's our friend in his first professional wrestling match. It doesn't have to be high profile. It's just the emotion of the moment that makes it the memory that it is. That's it.
Yeah, that was a ton of fun. But as far as the rest of the list, the next match I produced on this one is there's a couple of matches from here on this one event. What I everything I said about seeing Sabu and just wanting to see Sabu, not really knowing or caring what he's doing. I just wanted to see him, even if he wasn't in there for all that long. This was pretty much the opposite. As my favorite wrestler of all time was Mick Foley, and he was really by this time mostly retired, or at least was part-time at the time. But when I got tickets for WrestleMania 20 and I found out that Mick Foley was going to wrestle a match with The Rock against Evolution, I don't think I was ever any louder for any wrestling match in my life at that point. I was just glad to see Mick Foley wrestle a match, and I was there live for it. That is the stuff fandom dreams were made of. I'm talking about
Yes.
his, and not to mention, not only is Foley there, but we also got The Rock and Ric Flair, and I think it was Randy Orton.
Because that was when Mick Foley was in the feud with Randy Orton.
Yeah, so yeah, it was
Because I think
definitely Ric Flair and Randy Orton. Yeah,
because I think the April pay-per-view was when they had their no DQ match with the tax all in Randy Orton's back with that iconic image of Randy Orton with the tax in his back and that look on his face of extreme pain and horror.
in hindsight, I feel like I wasn't able to fully appreciate that feud for what it is when it was going on. But yeah, both guys did an amazing job, and this match was just like a dream match for me. It may not be the best technical match, but it was certainly a well put together one. And I, for one, was just that was like a bucket list item for me. I wanted to see Mick Foley live, wrestle live, and I did. Case closed. Boom. Move on to the next stuff.
Yeah,
Next on my list is something a little bit more recent. This is the only AEW match I've actually got on here because this one was a special one I saw obviously much later in life. This one is one of the first matches I took my wife to. And on this card, I was really hoping to get a good show, but one of the first matches I saw with her at AEW was on Dynamite. It was the Lucha Bros in a tag team title match against Jurassic Express, where Jurassic Express actually beat them for the title. And they ended up absolutely killing each other. This is one a lot of us probably remember quite vividly, between Ray Phoenix getting injured. I'm a huge, massive fan of Pentagon, and just the sheer surprise of we all liked Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy, but I don't think very many of us in attendance really expected them to win it. And then lo and behold, history was made. Jurassic Express win. That was a lot of
yeah.
fun.
Because I've always been a fan of Luchasaurus because I saw him get his start on a reality TV show that is a guilty pleasure of mine. He he was cast on a season of Big Brother, the the guy who plays the guy who actually is Luchasaurus underneath the mask. So and he used to talk all the time about his wrestling character and how he wrestled and how he was a dinosaur with a degree with a college degree. So I knew of the character, and then it said that AEW had signed him. So I'm like, oh shit, okay. So
You knew him
and
when.
and I knew that, and I also knew about Jungle Boy and his relationship with Luke Perry, and that Luke Perry was his dad, and I watched Luke Perry growing up and all that noise. So it's like these two guys put them together, and it just works in every way. And then you've got the Lucha Brothers, who are just insane. Everything they do is fluid, and I could never do any of it. so, so it's one of those like living vicariously through them. And I can, I was not in attendance. I was watching it on TV, and it was great on TV. I can only imagine how great it was in person.
Oh yeah, that was the main event of the night for a damn good reason. But moving on to the next match I've got on here, it's going back quite a bit further back to a little indie promotion called Ring of Honor. I had the pleasure of going to a couple of Ring of Honor shows in my time during its original run. And one of the main event of the first show I saw was Nigel McGuinness versus a guy named Takeshi Morishima for the Ring of Honor Championship. Now, yes, it was a smaller venue, but at the time, I remember the hype of that summer, the hype storyline of that summer was Nigel McGuinness was one of the biggest names in Ring of Honor who never could win the big one. He just the world title always eluded him. So there was this, and by this time Takeshi Morishima came out of nowhere. This just huge behemoth of a man was just like steamrolling through opponents left and right, and the way the roof blew off the arena when Nigel McGuinness hit his clothesline, his rebound lariat to win. That that was a huge moment. And just the vibe in that arena, that little arena in Jersey, was superb. And even elsewhere on the card, we were talking about this earlier, where some of the other matches on the card I'm looking at right now, we had the Vulture Squad of Jack Evans and Ruckus getting beat by the little team of Jimmy Jacobs and one Tyler Black, which was absolutely amazing. We also had Brian Danielson versus Chris Hero. We had the Briscoes versus Davey Richards and Rocky Romero. And then the final dark match of the entire night was a death match between Necro Butcher and Jay Briscoe. I remember walking out of the arena, I was stepping over little pools of blood left over by Necro Butcher. That that was an experience.
Yeah, it's like you think about names on that card that you just said now, and the it's like it's amazing how big a jump off point Ring of Honor became, because like if you run down the card, it's like three-quarters of the names on that card have hit WWE or AEW since.
Oh, and by the way, another match I missed on here was at the six-man trios team of Adam Pierce, BJ Whitmer, and Brent Albright defeated some some random team of Delirious, Kevin Steen, and El Generico.
Uh,
Who knew?
m-
Who
my
knew?
case, my case is proven. No, I'm just kidding. It's
Yeah.
just it, one of those things where it's like you go back in my case and you wish you could have seen an ROH show live when it was actually ROH. When it was when it was what it was in, I'm guessing that time would be like the mid 2000s.
Yeah, this is a show called Ring of Honor Undeniable in 2007.
Yeah. So it's like the beginnings of these guys' careers. They're now big in WWE. It's because that was the jump off point for Tyler Black, aka Seth Rollins, Kevin
I
Steen, and
I remember very vividly Age of the Fall. That faction was
yeah,
the hot faction of that summer.
that was huge. And I believe that was before Tyler Black had the actual title.
Yeah, that was
So he
when
hadn't
he was just starting to make a name for himself on the Ring of Honor side of things.
Yeah, so it's like you were there for the jump off point for three of the biggest stars in WWE right now.
No big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, that brings us to the last match I've got on my personal list of best matches I've ever seen live. And this one might come across as a little bit of a cheat, but like I mentioned before, I was fortunate enough to be at WrestleMania 20 with my dad. And the last match, the main event, I believe speaks for itself. Triple H versus Shawn Michaels versus Chris Benoit, where Chris Benoit and finally ended up winning the big one. That was probably the biggest, most exciting, hype filled moment I was ever a part of live. Between the match
Yeah.
quality, the energy in Madison Square Garden that night. Of course, it's all tainted now by what
Yeah.
Benoit did
It,
after the fact, but in
it
that moment, that was an all-time historic moment and one of the best moments I was ever a part of live.
yeah, it's like of course with everything that happened afterwards, it's like it's very hard to talk about it and bring it up now in a positive light. But I if you're there, and it's like I watched it and it at that point I was still buying pay-per-views without my parents' knowledge. at,
It's okay, I
at,
won't tell him.
at, at a and it's like because Chris Benoit was my favorite wrestler at the time, and how great that turned out. But but it was one of those you never thought you would see it because back at that time, okay, Chris Benoit could barely talk. Okay, he could wrestle like nobody else could, but that was back when you expected a WWE champion to be able to speak, to cut entertaining and good promos, and that was not Chris Benoit. Okay, so it was one of those like I never thought I would see my guy win the big one. I never thought I would see him win the title. And when he beat Triple H and Shawn Michaels at the same time, making Triple H tap out back when Triple H when the big thing was because that was at the point in time when Triple H was always being accused of holding people down. He was he, that was at the point in time where he was because the year before that was the infamous Booker T WrestleMania
Mm-hmm.
match that nobody ever wants to get into because obviously the build was what it was. and it turned into a match that was not good, and and all that. To go from that to doing what they did in that main event of WrestleMania 20, once again, watching it on the TV probably didn't do it justice to what you saw and heard when you were there. So, and from what I saw on the TV, it was pretty epic. So, if that can't compare to what it was there, I can only imagine what you felt.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those experiences where it was totally worth the price of admission. Yeah, it's tainted a little bit by what Benoit did, but I only say a little bit because it was the last pay-per-view I ever got to see live with my dad, and that's something that cannot be taken away from me. But on the bright side, I know that my stories are just one of several that are out there. Even just from one match, you said it yourself with seeing WLC and seeing the Shield and the Wyatt family at their peak. That's enough. So now I feel it only appropriate to kick it back over to our fellow fans. What are some matches that you were there live for? What are some of your favorites? And yes, I'm even going to extend it to our fellow scholars. If you want to share with us some of the best matches and moments that you were there personally for live, bring it on back. Let's do a part 2 to this. This was fun. So wherever you are all across the internet, drop us a line. Let us know what you think. Share some of your memories with us. Facebook, YouTube comments, and of course our personal accounts, plural, on the Twitter machines. Brian, where can they reach you?
You can reach me wishing I went to more live events as a teenager at Atomic Beanpole.
Hey, there's still plenty of wrestling to be seen, and we're going to be talking about it all on my personal account. You can follow me at I'm Robbie Rage on Twitter. And for all of these social media links and more, you can check us out on our link tree that's in the description below. That's linktree/scholars of wrestling. And with that, those are our memories. Those are our thoughts. It's all we got for this week. Scholars, we're waiting to hear from you, and we will hear from you because you know who we are. We are the Scholars of Wrestling, and you have just been schooled. You're
You're
welcome.
welcome.
See you all for more fun next week.